Good morning. We're on day 285 of our 365-day tour through the Bible. At the moment, we're looking at the Jesus story from St. Mark's Gospel, which was copied almost word for word by Matthew and Luke into theirs, and they added their own material afterwards. Today, we are looking at the story of Jairus' daughter and the woman who presumed. This is Mark chapter 5, verses 21 to 43 on day 285. Then Jesus crossed over again in the boat to the other side. There a large crowd gathered round him by the shore. Jairus, one of the governors of the synagogue, came. When he saw Jesus, he knelt down and couldn't stop himself, asking, "My daughter is dying. Come and lay your hands on her, so that she will get better and live." So he went with him, followed by a great crowd pressing in on him. There was a woman suffering from a blood flow for 12 years. She had suffered under many physicians and spent all she had, but instead of getting better, she was getting worse. She had heard about Jesus, and she came out of the crowd behind him. She touched his coat, saying to herself, "If only I can touch his clothes, I'll be healed." And the bleeding stopped. She felt in herself that she was healed of her trouble. Jesus knew power had gone from him, so he turned round and said, "Who was it touched my clothes?" The disciples said to him, "Can't you see how close the crowd is pressing? How can you ask who touched you?" He looked round to see who had done it. The woman, of course, knew what had been done for her, and she came up very scared and knelt down in front of him and told him all about it. He said to her, "Daughter, it's your faith that has healed you. Go in peace and be healed of your trouble." He was still speaking to her when someone came from the governor's house saying, "Your daughter has died. There is no need to bother the teacher any more." Jesus overheard this and said to the governor, "Don't fear. Just believe." He didn't allow anyone to go with him except Peter, James, and John, James's brother. When they got inside the governor's house, the whole place was in confusion, with people weeping and wailing loudly. Once inside, he said to them all, "Calm down, stop crying. The child isn't dead, she's asleep." They laughed at him. But he turned them all out of the house. Then he took the child's parents and those with him and went in where the child was. He held her hand and said to her, "Talitha cum," which means, "Listen, miss, I'm speaking to you. Get up." Right away the girl got up and walked. She was 12 years old. Immediately they were all taken totally aback. He told them seriously not to tell anyone what had taken place, and told them to give her something to eat. This isn't Mark shuffling his sources and making two miracles into one story. Once again, this may well be Peter's memories being related or passed on to Mark. There's a lot of incidental detail about the boat ride, the crowd waiting for Jesus, and other small details that help us to believe we have here a personal memory of a startling pair of events in the latter half of Jesus' ministry up north in Galilee. Here Jesus has recrossed the lake by boat, arriving in or near Capernaum on the northwest shore. Jairus is a respected lay governor of the synagogue, like a sidesman or a PCC member, though some older men were given the title governor as an honorific. However, Jairus now forgets all the honours due to him, casts away his dignity, and kneels humbly at Jesus' feet because his young daughter is at death's door. At this point, the narrative is broken into by the appearance of a woman who shouldn't even have been out of doors, let alone in the middle of a crowded street. In Leviticus 15:25-30, any flow of blood, including monthly periods, is regarded as unclean, and this woman's case would have made her permanently impure, totally forbidden from leaving home until the blood flow stopped. Clearly, this woman was desperate. She had heard about Jesus. This was her chance, unnoticed in the crowd, to reach out to Jesus quickly and then disappear back into the crowd, unseen. Jesus notices that something has happened. Power has been used. Many ancient commentators assume that Jesus knew all along who had touched him. I'm not so sure. He needed to evoke a profession of faith from the woman, and now he gets one that suits him fine. She is embarrassed at having been found out. Her flow of blood has this minute only just stopped. She is still ritually unclean. But I don't think that was her embarrassment. I think she was embarrassed at having stolen her healing without asking. Jesus doesn't mind. He listens to her story and loves her for the faith she placed in him. Meanwhile, news of the little girl's death is brought to her father, who is at the point of giving up. Jesus clearly overhears the conversation whilst he is finishing with the woman and insists on going to the house. He tells the governor, "Don't fear, just believe." And he turfs everyone out of the house except the child, her parents, and the 3 trusted witnesses. Jesus is not asking for a supreme act of faith on the parents' part, just not to panic, and have a steady trust that everything will be all right. When Jesus says she's not dead but asleep, his words could be taken in a number of ways. Could he have meant she's asleep, unconscious, or in a coma? But he hadn't even seen her yet. How could he tell? Or does he mean that death isn't the final state for humans, and she would rise one day? How does that fit in with him saying not to fear, just to believe? All we can tell is that the people in the house thought his comment was laughable. So he sends everyone else outside, takes hold of the girl's hand and speaks to her in Aramaic, saying, "Get up, little lamb." Or as Mark himself translated it into Greek, "Listen, miss, I'm speaking to you, get up." That Mark sees this as a miracle foreshadowing Christ's resurrection and his power over death cannot be doubted. Jesus does not yet want the full glare of publicity, so he asks those present not to spread the news far and wide, and ends with a practical note to give the girl some nourishment. In the next chapter, Mark gives us, in a kind of flashback, the story of the martyrdom of John the Baptist. We'll look at that story tomorrow, and I look forward to seeing you then.